Anywho, but these are my books. They're fiction about my journey through mental health and addiction. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about my black sheep journey. Hi, welcome in. My name is Jamie. For those of you who do know me or don't know me, I will just tell you a little bit about me. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders. I graduated from Grand Canyon University, and I did have a license to be an addiction counselor for 5 years in the state of Arizona. I received my licensure while completing my internship at Arizona State Prison. What else? Oh, so I did that for a couple of years. Then I worked with families who were DCS involved for about 9 months. And then after that, I worked in a group home with people who had dual diagnosis, so addiction and mental illness at the same time. I was taking care of a grandmother who had dementia. I had a midlife crisis and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to write. I want to tell my story. I don't want patients feeling like they have to compete with me. I just felt like it wouldn't be appropriate for me to have a public persona. So I left that field so I could write my book, and I published my very first book during the pandemic in 2019, Memoirs of a Black Sheep. Like I said, you can read it for free on the A to Z website. You can get the Kindle version for like $9.99. My TikTok shop, for those of you in the US, these should be on sale for $5.50 right now. For whatever reason, I cannot attach the cart. I may do a live reading again. I haven't done one since Thanksgiving, but I'm really thinking about doing another one. The very first time I did this, it took 5 hours to get through. It's only a 3-hour book, and this is just a disclaimer that I like to give everyone. I am sharing education and lived experience. I am not sharing medical, mental health, legal, or addiction treatment advice. I am no longer a licensed therapist, but if I was a licensed therapist, I wouldn't be able to be your therapist because I'm just some random person on the internet. Live is not a substitute for professional care. I am not diagnosing anyone. I cannot assess individual safety in the comments section. And if something in this conversation brings up intense distress, please pause, ground, reach out to somebody you trust. If not, you can always call the 988 line. Before we get into the questions tonight, I want to name something out loud. And for those of you who are new, I always read from my notes so that I don't stumble through and say 1,000 times. A lot of us did not get addicted to a substance. We got addicted to relief. We got addicted to not feeling. We got addicted to quieting a mind that never learned how to be safe. And the tricky part is, a coping skill can look like help at first. It can feel like help at first, like survival. And ultimately, at some point, that coping can turn into a cost. And when we think about substances, we always think the hard stuff, right? The illegal stuff. But a lot of us do things that are addictive in nature. We cope with food. We cope with exercise. We cope with our phones, with TikTok, whatever it is. Okay, there's many different ways to cope. There's process addictions as well. So tonight we're going to talk about 3 things that can change somebody's whole life. Why does coping turn into dependence? Is shame a motivator or a barrier? And does addiction usually start with trauma? I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm just here to tell the truth. I'm here to tell my story, share my experience. Because if you've ever felt like you were the problem in your family or like you were the black sheep, there's a good chance that you aren't crazy. And you're in good company because I am the black sheep of my family, but I'm not anymore. So, but if you're listening right now and you feel seen, I want you to stay. Drop a me in the comments if you can relate to being the black sheep, or just sit there quietly, and that's okay too. So the first thing we're gonna go over, again, brief recap here. My name is Jamie. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in Christian counseling with a focus on substance abuse and addictive disorders. I completed the internship at Arizona State Prison, but that's not where my story started. Before the degrees, before the credentials, before the podcast, before the TikTok, before wherever you've seen me, because I do have some media features, believe it or not, I was the wife of a street pharmacist, and we were using that language because if I say what he really was, then I end up with a restriction. And I was addicted to math, and I don't mean mathematics, okay? So I want to talk about the version of ourselves that we try to bury once we become respectable folks. Here's the truth. The most transformational seasons of our lives rarely look impressive while we are living them. And I say this because I feel like the most frustrating parts of my life are the parts where I've gotten the most growth. I just have a quick question you can answer in the chat if you want. You don't have to, but if you would like to, feel free. Have you ever felt like something in your past disqualified you? And I don't mean just related to addiction. This could be anything in your past that maybe you're ashamed of, whatever. Have you ever felt like something has disqualified you? And by disqualified you, I mean like you could feel yourself changing, but you still thought, yeah, people know the old me, and like you discount who you are. Yes. Sometimes people see the old us, or they know the old us, and maybe we hold it against ourselves worse than other people. Maybe we hold it against ourselves as much as other people. I think it just really is circumstantial, right? But if that's you, you're not alone. You are not alone. And do you believe that people can truly reinvent themselves, not just rebrand, not just get it together for a season? I mean reinvent. What's harder? What's harder for you, believing you can change or believing people will let you? Just thoughts to ponder on. You're more than welcome to unmute and discuss if you like. I wanted to ask you what identity you have to outgrow. What identity did you have to outgrow? I'm sorry, the strong person, the fixer, the angry one, the invisible one, the party person, or the I'm fine one. Because I feel like these are the personalities of those of us who struggle with substances. You know, I'm the fixer in my family. I want to fix everything. I want to solve everybody's problems. And I've really had to scale back and realize like, I need to stop trying to fix everyone else and just fix my own shit first. You know what? Canada says all of them. I, to some degree, have also felt like I have probably been every single one. I was the angry one. I have felt invisible at times. I was the party animal because I was exhausted from being the fixer. And I was also the I'm fine because I didn't want someone to know that I was struggling. So I think all of those can definitely play a role. We all kind of, as we get older, from kids to adults to 90-year-old people, our identities evolve, and we even outgrow our identities a little bit to some degree. Sometimes we find that we don't just have one. You saying that you could relate to all of those, Canada, I think that's a sign of the evolution that we have. Well, I'm gonna go into the chaos of my life, and this is my real life. My addiction didn't start with the math. My addiction started with escape. It started with wanting relief. I wanted relief from grief. I wanted relief from the overwhelming amount of chaos I was feeling in my life at that time. When you live in survival mode long enough, chaos starts to feel normal. It felt so normal for me that it took me years to adjust to not being around chaos to now I can almost not even handle too much noise. It's just too much for me. And there are times where I'm like, how the fuck did I live like this? Like how? When I was in that life, I wasn't thinking about I'm ruining my future. I was thinking I'm just trying to get through today, right? I mean, not necessarily the most abnormal of thinking, but I was maybe trying to get through the day in ways that were not benefiting me at all. Addiction is rarely about the substance. It's often about the pain that we feel underneath. It could be physical pain. It could be emotional pain. It could be trauma. There's kind of a question we used to like to throw around when I was going to school about what do you think came first, the addiction or the trauma? Probably the trauma, right? What do you think came first, the pain or the addiction? Or, you know, and it was just something we used to go back and forth with. It was a very interesting conversation, really. And I still think about it. My brain always thinks about stuff like that. National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that relapse rates for substance use disorders are comparable to other chronic illnesses like asthma and hypertension. I know we have the whole debate over, is it a disease or a choice? That's not where we're going to go with this discussion tonight. I think that that is oversimplifying something that's very complex, because As most of us know, anybody can become an addict. It doesn't matter how much money they make or how much money they don't make. Your life could fall apart tomorrow and you could be that person who you never thought you would be. It's seen as a moral collapse by some, especially those who've never been touched by it, whether somebody they love or their own life. And it's viewed as a moral collapse. I don't believe that it is. I believe that it's a chronic condition, and we can argue choice and disease later, but it is chronic regardless. Society doesn't treat it like it's not a moral collapse. Society treats it like it's a character flaw. And so that kind of brings me to the next part of this discussion, which is, when does coping turn into dependence? When does coping with pain turn into dependence? Coping turns into dependence when the strategy stops being a choice and starts being a requirement. And that's why I don't want to do the choice versus chronic illness debate, right? Coping turns into dependence when the strategy stops being a choice and starts being a requirement. A few practical, you might be crossing the line markers. Tolerance. You need more of the thing, whether it's substance, scrolling, work, spending, food, gambling, to get the same relief. Loss of flexibility. You can't use other coping skills anymore, or they feel pointless compared to the easiest one, the quickest one, the fastest one. You start arranging narrowing your life when you start arranging your day around your addiction or arranging your day around recovering from it. And I did this. My entire day revolved around, did I have enough? Did I need to get more? Was I going to need to sleep? What did I need to do before I fell asleep? What would happen if I fell asleep and didn't get up to go to work or get the, kids off to school or cook dinner or whatever? Using to escape internal states. That was me. It was less of, this helps me decompress, and more of, I can't be me without this. I can't function without this. I don't know how to live life without this. And the costs kept rising. Relationships, money, health, self-respect, everything was taking a hit in my life. And I was doing things that didn't match who I wanted to be. And it created more than shame. It created, I felt like scum of the earth. And do you think that helped me stop wanting to use? No. I sat on my pity pot and I kept thinking, this is the only way I can survive. And I don't say this because I'm proud of it. I never want to glorify anything. When I think about some of the stupid shit I think what was I doing? Some of the stupid stuff I did. I'm sorry. So I don't want to come from a place of glorification, but I was really feeling the lowest of low. But I was, continuing to cope in the most unhealthy way possible. But coping is something that you use. Coping is a skill that you use. Coping can be healthy. You can listen to music, and it's coping. You can write, and that's coping. You use substances, that's coping. Doesn't make it appropriate, but it's coping. Dependence is something that starts to use you. Dependence is something that starts to use you. And I really think of the Marilyn Manson song, I don't like the drugs, but the drugs like me, because that's how I felt by the time I started getting sober. Was, I don't like the drugs, but them drugs sure liked me. Is shame a motivator or a barrier? Again, it's not that simple, right? Shame can create short-term compliance, but it is a long-term barrier to change. You can shame me today. That's just going to make me more secretive. That's just going to make me more embarrassed. It's going to make me isolate more. And I might quit in that moment because you embarrassed me. But it kind of works against me because we're human and we don't think, oh, if you kick me enough, I'll behave. We think, if you're going to keep kicking me while I'm down, why bother getting up? And shame sometimes produces a quick burst of, I'll fix this because it's painful to sit in. How many times have we seen somebody say, okay, I'll get better, and they do really well for a day or a week or a month, and then they just kind of forget? It's because the shame doesn't have a long-lasting effect. We forget. Shame also says, I am bad. It's very personal. It's very personal. It's not, I did something harmful. We're not taking accountability for the behavior. We're just saying, I'm a bad person. Instead of owning the action, we're just taking on the, I'm the worst person in the world. And guilt versus shame. Let's talk about how we need to distinct this, which is, shame also says I am bad, not I did something harmful. It takes the accountability out of the equation. That belief tends to push people towards secrecy, isolation, and numbing, and those are relapse conditions. You're given the perfect storm for relapse. Now we're going to talk about guilt versus shame. Guilt is, I did something I regret. It is often repairable, and it is often motivating. I really hurt so-and-so's feelings, and I miss, I don't want them to not be in my life, so I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to do better. Shame is, I am the problem. And it can cause paralysis, it can cause isolation, it can cause you to want to hide. And shame doesn't heal people, it manages people, but healing needs truth plus safety, right? Do you think most addiction starts with trauma? I think I kind of touched on that a little bit. We used to argue, do you think trauma was before the addiction or the addiction was a result of the trauma? A lot of addiction starts as an attempt to regulate pain. And I want to think about the early 2000s, specifically about the pharmaceuticals that were being pushed at that time. There were pharmaceuticals that were being sold safer as other pharmaceuticals. And then all of a sudden one day they realized, oh my God, this is killing people. We're just going to pull them off. They didn't taper down. They didn't put them on medication-assisted treatment. And then many of those people just went to the streets and lots of them didn't make it out. They were attempting to regulate pain. Whether they had legitimate pain that turned into dependence from the medication or whether they didn't, doesn't matter. They were attempting to regulate pain, physical or mental or whatever, right? Trauma is a huge pathway, but it's not the only one. But some of the common entry points for addiction, and these are what happened with me, is trauma and chronic stress. My father passed away. I was with my father when he passed away. I was 19 years old, pregnant with my second child, and afraid I was going to lose that baby because of my grief. So I held it all in, just trying to hold it together. And when I finally had that baby, had another baby, like 18 months later. So I'm just holding on to all of this through 2 pregnancies. And then one day I was like, fuck it. If you can't beat them, join them, And I had left my street pharmacist for many complicated reasons. I'm not gonna disparage him online because we're past that, but I thought maybe I can win him back if I can just understand what all this is about. And that's how I started. I was a closet user. That trauma and that chronic stress is what got me there. I was so traumatized. It took me years to realize I was traumatized. I was afraid to go to sleep at night. I had to fall asleep with every single light in my house on. Every single light in my house on. I am not kidding. I was so afraid that when my ex-husband moved out and I was on my own, that something was going to happen to me, although I didn't know what it was going to be, that I slept on the couch and each one of my children slept on the other couches in the living room. There was so much dysfunction because I was afraid because of my trauma, and that trauma went unaddressed for 10 years. I was only in active addiction for 2, thankfully. But that trauma and that chronic stress led me to not want to go to sleep. So part of it was I'm trying to raise 3 small children and hold down a job. Part of it was I'm trying to do anything I can to not go to sleep, because by the time I would fall asleep, I would be so exhausted. I didn't have to dream and I didn't have to be afraid. I had attachment wounds. I felt abandoned. I felt lonely. I had fear. And I really just needed something. And that thing was math. And it made me feel good. And I had this trauma that I didn't know at that time. It was 2001. Okay, at that time, I didn't realize, it was 2002, I'm sorry. My father passed away in 2002. That I had a mental health condition. I didn't realize that I had trauma and severe depression brought on by that trauma. So those were my entry points. But some of the other entry points that can maybe pertain to other people is physical pain, medical exposure, so sleep meds that maybe became hard to stop, environment and learning, family patterns. It can happen. It can happen. I've seen people come from good families and they use and they're the black sheep. And I have seen people from entire families where the substance use is intergenerational. It doesn't make any of us in recovery bad people. It just means that we went through a totally different life experience. And in some families, it can be normalized to do substances. When you grow up around it or you live around it all the time, why would it bother you? You're used to it. That's your normal, right? The same way my chaos was my normal, that's the way it is for some people with addiction and substance use. The other entry point is biology and genetics. Sometimes some people are more susceptible to substance use than other people. There are people who can go out and use once experimentally and never touch something again. There are people who go out and use once and they never stop using. And then you have all the people in between, right? I want to frame this in a way that everybody understands whatever you've been through in life, addiction, not addiction, however you got there, whatever you dealt with, whatever you went through was valid. That was a valid part of your life, regardless of where you are in your journey. Trauma is often the spark or the fuel. But addiction is usually the solution that somebody found before they had better tools. And that's what happened with me. Okay. I was raised in a conservative home. We went to church. I went to church 2 days a week sometimes because my parents wanted to sleep in on Sundays. So they'd send us to church on Sunday. But I was raised Adventist. So we went to church on Saturday. So I spent a lot of time in church. You would have probably, my parents were married 20 years until my father died. My husband's parents are still married. My first husband's parents are still married. My second husband, different story. There were all the things that statistically should have set us up for success, right? I got pregnant in high school. So that was my first, like, I gotta be different, right? That was my first black sheep move. I wanted to marry a pastor. I married a street pharmacist. And then I became a user. So, you know, it's crazy because literally we all come from different walks of life. And we can think, oh, I would never expect this person to do that or that person to do that. But it happens. And I'm living proof that it can happen to anybody. When shame is driving you and you don't seek help, you seek hiding. And when you're hiding, you reach for whatever makes you feel okay fast. I had a breaking point, obviously. Had a breaking point. There's a moment, sometimes it's not dramatic, where the identity that you're living no longer fits you. And that's what happened with me. Sobriety didn't just remove a substance from my life. It removed an entire persona. I was masking, and I was trying to further mask by using substances. And I want to let that sit for a minute. I had to grieve the version of me that survived that season, even if she was destructive. And I didn't realize that early on. And I went running. I went running into the Army. This was during the Bush era. If you had a pulse, you could go to war. It was post 9/11. And I went running to the Army because I was struggling in early sobriety. I was struggling just to stay sober. I'd make it 90 days and celebrate every 90 days that I'd made it 90 days. And I had lost everything at this point. I knew that I was not going to be a good mom if I kept going through that. So I ran. And for the first time in my adult life, I had to make big girl decisions. I was 24 years old. And I joined the Army because I needed the structure and I needed the discipline. And oddly enough, I have a very tumultuous relationship with one of my siblings. And I was so afraid of coming home and hearing, I knew you wouldn't make it, that's what kept me going in boot camp. And I even told him that years later. I was like, you know, the only reason that I made it through boot camp was because I was bound and determined not to come home and hear you say, I told you you couldn't do it. And he was like, if that's what kept you motivated, I'm kind of proud of you. That was my first step away from chaos. And it was so freaking weird. Reinvention for me was violent, but not in a way that it's like somebody ripped the tablecloth out from under the dishes, but all the dishes came with it. And it was psychologically like a lot. And I didn't realize at the time, like I was at the best time of my life to really make the change because I needed the indoctrination the military gave me to change my life because I can't make a better habit without somebody up my ass. Seriously. I had to lose everything in order to grow. I had to lose everything. And I had to let go of a lot. And I had to sit down with my kids who were 6'3" and 2 at the time and be like, Grandma wants to adopt you. How do you guys feel about that? And the only one who really could say anything was my oldest. He was like, yeah, okay, we're happy here. And that was a hard decision for me because, you know, I'm a mom and I got a lot of shit for being a mom who lost her kids. I got a lot of shit. And you know what? I would rather give them stability and let people say shit about me than not have given them stability. And I have a very good relationship with my kids now. I want to someday interview my son about his perspective, but he ain't ready yet. I had to lose a lot in order to grow. And sometimes I had to lose people. Sometimes I had to change places. Sometimes I had to give up things. Sometimes I had to make lifestyle changes. There are people that I still hear about or hear from occasionally that I don't talk to, or I've had to distance myself because I can't watch the train wreck, and it sucks. It really sucks. But I also can't get sucked into the train wreck either. I'm happy that the real me evolved in all of this. I guess my question is, do you think reinvention requires isolation? I don't, but I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on that.
For me, my reinvention did start off as isolation because I had to, quote unquote, detox from those around me who did not fit the new person I was becoming. And then I learned that the isolation was only for a short period of time because I did need to have people around me. Yeah, really, I did. And finding those who can understand me without judgment was very, very hard. It was a tedious process of having to filter through those people because many will say that they have your back until they don't. Right. They have your back through the good times, but they're not there for the bad because they can't stand to, quote unquote, stand to see you in that position. But you need them to be there while you're going through the situations.
Right.
So, and I've been lucky to find that both in real life, through different apps, and of course through here, and solidifying that with joining your agency, Jamie. And I thank you so much for creating that, the safe community where we support each other, keep each other accountable, and just love on each other.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love that you guys showed up for me tonight. Like, this is, I wish that I had time to go live every day because I forgot how much I missed this, but to be honest, I needed the break I had last week. So yeah, I think that ultimately reinvention can sometimes require privacy. I want to talk about something for a minute that still ties into what we're talking about. Marcella has a class that I'm in, and one of our assignments this week was we had to take ourselves on a date by ourselves. And I realized this morning, I decided I'm going to get up early every morning, and that's going to be my date with myself in the morning. And I may still take like an entire afternoon, but right now I want to do it every morning because I think it's a good practice. And I have learned that by ignoring the phone and doing whatever it is I want to do for that first hour, whether it's checking email, reading a book, playing a game, just laying there in the dark, staring at the sea, whatever it is, that first hour of the day is mine. And I feel like that speaks to a bigger picture that sometimes when you change and when you're making moves, whether you're in recovery or not, sometimes you need to separate yourself from the rest of the world, whether it's in small increments or going offline for a month to do what you have to do to get where you need to be. I think just that little assignment really gave me a lot of reflection about how sometimes we hold ourselves back by not giving ourselves enough time. And I like the whole, I need to have a date with myself. She said, on a personal level, not sure if it's reinvention or the uncovering what and who is hidden. I feel definitely, I don't even know if it's reinvention for me. I think it's evolution. I think it's like coming into who I really am. And I think that's what I've needed. And I think that part of that has to be done separate from the rest of the world. And even though I don't like to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, that first hour of the day, I don't have dogs barking. I don't have a kid needing anything. Only noise I hear sometimes is my husband snoring, and that's it. But I have that silence that I need. Taking yourself on a date is way deeper than that. Yes. I really think that it's about, and I think it is a lot deeper than that. I think that I do self-care, but I don't do it enough. It should be part of my daily routine, not part of my weekly routine. I think that we all have to take self-care, whether it is, I got to go hide in the bathroom for 20 minutes and pretend I'm taking a poop to get away from the kids, right? Or I need to take my nap or whatever. I think we all really have to think about what's for us. I think for me, I need time in the morning. And I think that I need to practice, in addition to that time, self-care, whether it's reading a book, going out, doing something, but understanding who I am and where I want to be. And I think that's part of like my bigger picture And it ties into not only just recovery, but running a business and juggling a lot of different things like I do, wearing a lot of different hats. If I, I'm always telling people you can't pour from an empty cup. Well, if I'm not first, I can't help anyone else.
I need to interrupt.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking about this taking yourself on a date. It was a lot deeper than that, Jamie, because what you're learning is connecting with who you used to be, because that's really who you are. When we're born with all these beautiful ideas in our head once they start to develop and grow, once we understand cognitive thought.
Mm-hmm.
So then we mature.
Yeah.
But it also for me personally,
Mm-hmm.
it gets to the point where, okay, I've matured, but then I think back to the way I used to think as a child, and I say, I miss that. I miss that whimsy. I miss having the magic. And my kids always tell me, oh, you're never going to grow up. No, I don't want to. So I don't just take me on a date. I take my inner child on a date.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something about pouring from an empty cup. I have to tell you something Luna taught me years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She's 14. She maybe was 5 or 6. When I was trying to explain this to her, honey, you cannot pour from an empty cup. She goes, my cup's not empty. And I'm looking in it. She says, there's air in there. And what do we consider air in the spiritual community? That's communication. So if there's nothing but air in the cup, that means that there's something that we have in there. We have the ability to communicate our wants and needs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we fill it with something else, then we can give to others. But when it's just air,
Mm-hmm.
then we're still full. We're still full of all the things we want to say.
Right. Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that on the table for you.
No, I appreciate that. I really do. I never even thought of it like that. See, kids are so damn smart. They really are. So I think with that actually makes sense. And I don't want to say I forgot the inner child part of it. I think I just hadn't finished reflecting on that part, because I like to go over my notes every day. So have you ever grieved an old version of yourself? I have grieved an old version of myself. Am I the only one? Has anyone else grieved an older version of their self?
I have not.
Okay.
I was happy to let them go. And that inner child is still here. So I never grieved her. I'm just welcoming her back in.
I fucking love that. Okay. I love that.
I've never grieved my old self because I always say, like, you hear me in different lives saying that sometimes people are in your life for a reason, others for a season. That goes for myself too.
Right.
I was that person for a season and for a reason, so that way I can develop and become the person I am today. So I do not mourn that person because she's not dead.
Right.
She's there watching me, and she actually keeps me from going backwards and repeating the same errors.
Yeah. I like that. I think I have grieved the older version of myself, just because there are parts of me that I don't know I'll ever get back. And I think I want them back, and I will do my best. But I think, like, the biggest thing for me is I feel like trauma made me jaded, and I want to go back to the child who was so naive about the world sometimes, because it was so much easier to live life when you had no idea how terrible the world was. I don't sit on that. I don't harbor that, but there are times where I'm like, God, I wish I would have enjoyed being a kid a lot more. I don't miss being numb. I don't miss coping with trauma with substances. I don't miss that at all. And that version of me was really freaking hard to let go of. But when I did, it was like almost like having a rock lifted off my back or something. Because for a long time, I thought that was the only way that I could cope, was to be numb. I don't regret anything that I've been through, though, because everything that I have been through has got me here. And I was talking somebody that I knew 20 years ago. This is crazy. He happened to run into one of my kids where my son works. And my son texted me one day and was like, hey, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, yeah, I know so-and-so. He's like, he just walked in today and was like, are you Jamie's son? And he was shocked. So I was talking to him today and just like catching up with him. And I was like, oh God, you like really knew me in my unhinged years, you know? And he was like, oh, I don't even think anything about that, you know? And I told him today, The best thing that ever happened to me wasn't the addiction, but it was being forced to get my shit together and move away from this fucking town I lived in, because I don't think if I had never done substances, I think I would still be in this podunk town doing nothing with my life. So I think that everything I've been through, no matter how shitty, no matter how horrible, got me where I am now. And I am in a much better position in life than I ever envisioned for myself. I think I had no hope when I was younger. So grief can be the price of reinvention, but not everybody may see it that way. I think on that, I'm kind of on the fence. A little bit about, I guess, my evolution. When I went to school for psychology because I wanted to understand. Actually, I went to school for psychology because I thought it would be the easiest degree to get while I was in the Army. So I started taking the classes, then I stopped, then I started, then I stopped. As I went through the process, I really loved psychology, and I've always been a weird psychology person. Like, people fascinate me. And I've had this knack for getting crafty. Don't feel singled out here, okay? But I have this knack for people will just tell me anything and I don't have to ask much. And I've been that way since I was a child. I can literally get information that I'm not even trying to be nosy. I will get information out of people without even trying. So I have this gift that I just didn't know how to use all these years. So I went to school for psychology and was like, oh my God, I'd be a great fucking therapist, because people tell me stuff and sometimes it's even too much for me, you know, and I've learned to set boundaries. But that's really where I think my reinvention, my evolution kind of came into play. I interned in the prison, and it's really funny because when I first started going to school, I was like, I want to work with female inmates. Well, I learned that I don't want to work with female inmates. The yard politics are a little less dramatic. But I remember sitting across from the men who are incarcerated thinking, there's a lot of pain here that nobody talks about. There's a lot of people who maybe don't have the support that they need. Their families want them to stay clean and sober, but maybe they don't know how to help them stay clean and sober, or they're not interested in changing their lifestyle for their loved one. I just remember thinking there's a lot of pain here that nobody talks about. And in Arizona, when we would do counseling with the inmates, it was group counseling. There was no individual counseling. It was group counseling. Well, here we have yard politics. That doesn't mean I agree with it, but I understand it's a subculture. It's how it works. They couldn't always be who they needed to be to get better, right? I've always thought, like, in theory, we think people are going to prison and getting rehabilitated, especially if they're incarcerated for substances, right? They're not. They're not. In theory, they should be, but they're not. It's a hard thing to work in the prison. And I was talking about this today too. The bureaucracy of politics as staff in a prison is probably worse than the fucking yard politics. That's my opinion, and I will die on that fucking hill. And it's about how can we look good to the state for our rehabilitation, not actually about treating people. And I didn't like that. I also worked in a private prison, which is a for-profit prison, and I do not believe we should be monetizing incarceration. I don't. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow, but I needed my internship, so I took it. But, you know, I look back at that and I think it was still a really good experience for me, regardless of where I stand with that. But before I get way off topic, I just remember sitting in that room, in the classroom that we would hold classes in, and thinking, like, I've been the client. I have felt like nobody understood. And I certainly could never be like, oh yeah, I understand what it's like to be addicted. But I've also been the clinician, and I like to really make it clear that lived experience does not disqualify you. Unlived experience does not disqualify you from showing empathy. If lived experience is something that you have and it's integrated properly, it can actually help refine you. It can help refine you as a person, help refine you as a leader, help refine you as a counselor, help refine you as a person healing from addiction. I don't know, I just think that's important, because I used to sit in there and think, like, I know why our recidivism rate is so high. I would sit in there and be like, I get it now. I get it now. They're not getting what they need. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration consistently reports that stigma is one of the biggest delays to people seeking treatment. And it also increases the risk of relapse. Silence is actually costing lives. I don't really know where I was going with that, but silence is costing lives. I did feel a little bit burned out by the time I left the field. but I didn't feel like I had failed. I just felt like this is so much bigger. It's a systemic issue. It is a political issue. It is a health issue. It's all these different things overlapped. And it was kind of a bitter pill because it was like, I'm leaving a field I love. I'm leaving a field I know I'm good at. But I see why nobody gets sober and stays sober. I'm not going to say nobody, but I see why the sobriety, why the rehabilitation rates are so low for incarcerated people and for people on substances, and even in the mental health field. I get it now, because everything is really not aimed at treatment. It's just aimed at looking like it's a dog and pony show for the world. Oh, look how many people we healed. It's not showing how many people didn't heal. Would you trust somebody more if they survived what you're facing? Not somebody who read about it. Not like, would you trust somebody more if they survived what you're facing? Like someone who lived it and came out with wisdom. I used to say, oh, you just don't understand. Okay, well, now I know that now after having gone through the education, I do understand that you don't have to actually have been in recovery to understand addiction. I didn't used to think that, but now I do. I understand, like, okay, they actually teach you enough, you do enough hands-on work that you can actually understand it. You have to be willing to understand it. I don't think that credentials are the only thing that are important, though. One thing that I've really seen recently in the addiction field that I like is peer support. Peer support is great because I think sometimes you need that person who's on your level who can be like, yo, don't lie to me. Like, I know what you're going through. I've been there. And sometimes that peer support can do something a counselor can't do because of the way ethics and boundaries should work in theory. I say should work. Okay. That is not a perfect system either. We're not going to go there tonight, but I think that burnout can sometimes be redirection. And for me, that's what it was. It was redirection for me. It made me realize that my mission was changing. My mission started out as I want to work with people in this field. Now my mission is I just want to tell the fucking world and create an impact. Whether it's a small impact or a big impact. I just want to make an impact where I actually feel like it might fucking matter. And it doesn't feel like it matters when you're in the health system in the US. Sorry, it doesn't. People also love a good comeback story. And I'm one of those people. I'm a stories person. I love stories. I want to see people succeed. I love stories where people can say, I lived my whole life and it was wonderful. But I also love stories where you hear the struggle and you hear the strength that somebody got out of that struggle. And I think that is a great way to encourage change. And I think it makes it more relatable. And when you think about it, right, and you look at social media, you look at TikTok, storytellers on the platform are the people that are some of the biggest creators on the platform, because there's something in their story, in their journey, in their life, in their skit, whatever it is they're doing that's relatable, right? Even the parodies. I've seen some really hilarious parodies, but they're like so real. You know, like the guy that does Facebook dads, if you guys ever seen him, you know, like it's like, sadly, it's kind of funny. And I think that being vulnerable can be really hard, especially in the world of social media. I've had my book out for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, almost 7 years. Holy shit, it's been almost 7 years. Sometimes I have a hard time being like, yo, did y'all know I wrote a book? Because it's still a part of me that's vulnerable. It's still a part of me that's vulnerable. And it's hard sometimes. Like, yeah, this was my life. This was my actual it's written as a fiction, but this was my fucking life. And it's crazy. So if you guys think I should do another live reading, let me know and I'll plan one out. I don't know if I can do it all in one sitting. I asked Mars if she would read it for me and I just sit on the live. So we might do that because like here's the thing. I can only read this like once every 5 years and then I never want to see it again. So I might have someone else read it on a live, but if you guys are interested, let me know. I'll set something up. Book 2, book 3, I haven't looked at them 100 times, so I can read those. A lot of people really liked it when I read the book on a live. We did have to use some creative phrasing and I did have to like edit a little bit because there is some parts in there that can be triggering. I believe in telling your story. I told mine, as I said earlier, as a fiction because I was married to a street pharmacist and he's on his 3rd prison term and he's trying to get out, actually fix his life. And so I didn't want him to catch a case over some shit I said in the book. I mean, I also didn't want to get sued because I write stories about even people in my family that They may not appreciate like my aunt, who's a stripper, who I didn't really do her any justice in that book. But I just want you to know, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, or even if there's somebody out there watching from the hallway who's still contemplating recovery, society loves redemption stories. You're going to have a lot of people who hate on the fact that you used to be this or you used to be that. I was talking about this today with somebody too. There's a person in my life that I've known for a very long time that hates me hates me by proxy because they hate my mom. And they're related to me and they hate me, and I'm just this piece of shit person who was all tweaked out 20 fucking years ago. Okay, I let that shit go 20 years ago. They haven't. I don't care. I don't care if they never say a nice thing about me again, because guess what? Today was the first time in probably 15 fucking years I've even thought about that person because someone else brought them up. That's how little relevance they have in my life. And they apparently talk about me enough to talk shit about me still. And I want you to know that that's going to happen. But guess what? For every person that fucking hates you, there's going to be 10 people who are inspired by your story, whatever it is. Whatever it is. Society loves redemption stories. They judge people in real time, but they love a redemption arc. And I want you to think about that. We applaud recovery when it's polished. We applaud recovery when it looks so perfect and aesthetic. But sometimes we are judging people, or we are avoiding people who are still struggling, or we don't want to be like, oh, good job, you cut back your use because you feel like you're enabling, because that's what we're told, right? Jamie supports all paths to recovery. Not a 12-step person, but I support harm reduction. There are people out there who are like, oh, harm reduction is just enabling. Okay, well, so judgment isn't helping either. Shaming isn't helping. Black sheep, being the black sheep in the family is a proud title I will hold. Fortunately, I think we're at a life where all three of us have been the black sheep at one point or another, but two of us are bigger black sheep than the other. We have a little brother that's like the golden child. Being the black sheep in a family or system is often the person who disrupts the family cycles, good or bad. And sometimes being the black sheep is the cost of becoming self-aware. It is what it is. You can look at it in a negative light, or you can look at it in a positive light. I wanted to write Memoirs of a Black Sheep because I wanted to acknowledge my story. I wanted to own my story. But I also wanted to not act like that part of my life never happened, because it did. And I'll tell you what, even if you try to act like it never happened, some motherfucker out there will remind you that that shit happened. And I didn't want people to see me in a good stage of my life and be like, oh, she had such a great life. No, you get real, raw, ugly truth about my life. But I do have 3, okay? So there's Memoirs of a Black Sheep. That's book 1. First 10 chapters are on my Memoirs of a Black Sheep playlist here on TikTok. First 10 chapters of that book. This is book 2, Lost Black Sheep, which you probably, there we go, Lost Black Sheep. And then book number 3 is Black Sheep Run. Nobody's required to purchase anything. You can read it for FREE if you have Kindle Unlimited or the A to Z Prime. I also want you to know that my book does not glamorize addiction, but it does talk in detail about the passing of my father. So if you have to skip that chapter, I will not be offended. It's a pretty tough moment for me. I try not to be too graphic, but it can be triggering. If you've ever felt like the outlier, the problem child, or the one who didn't fit, this book might be for you. So, and that's it. That's all I got tonight, guys. Thoughts, feedback, anything? Thank you guys all for showing up for me. I appreciate each and every single one of you.
We appreciate you thanking us for coming, but it's the bare minimum that we can do for you with everything that you do for us on the daily. So thank you once again, like Noah said, thank you for sharing with us, and just thank you for being you, and thank you for being there for us.
Oh, yeah, no problem.